If you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. And I, floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Naveed. Thank you everyone for joining today's session, and hope you guys are looking for the good weekend. So with that, let's see. I'll mostly dive more into the demos, especially how the prompt flow evaluator works. I'm expecting that you guys have seen the previous demo that I have showcased around what the prompt flow is about, but I'll try to quickly recap what we covered last time, and then we'll do a continuation from there. And today we're gonna just take a look mainly around the evaluator piece and also looking into the deployment side of it, right? So how you deploy the prompt flow once it's ready to be deployed in production or some other environments where you can put your endpoint there and basically connecting that endpoint for your applications to use that right at the end. So with that, let's quickly get started. So not going to jump too much into that. So just for folks who maybe just didn't attend the last session, so there are just briefly just recap what we covered there. That when you do a Gen AI kind of related projects, you normally run into various different issues, right, or challenges where you are trying to bring your own private data, and then especially the prompt engineering side where you can have various different variations of prompts, which you may need to keep track of it, what different changes that you have made and what result it may have produced, whether it may be either improved the overall results or it could potentially have degraded the result, right? So you need to continue to refine your prompts, and these are some of the challenges which have been continue to be popular. People have been using their own internal libraries to really deal with those. And then eventually the people do like to compare the performance and the evaluation of those different prompts and the outcomes that it has produced, and comparing against either some groundedness of the data that they may already have it, or they may be just even using the GPT-4 as a judge for that data, right? That whatever has been generated compared against what has been expected outcome. So those kind of stuff is definitely a challenge there. And the versioning, you know, that keeping track of each version of those different variations and how it evolved and comparing those different versions is also quite challenging for people to be dealing with that. And lastly, AI safety is a big concern for people. So these are kind of a challenge that normally people have been dealing with. And this is really where PromptFlow comes in and try to address these challenges by providing a development tool to really overcome some of these challenges, and then giving a easier user interface and through the code down the road, hopefully SDKs and all those things, you will be able to really manage some of these pipelines associated with this prompt flow. So a couple of, I'm not going to dive too much into this one. Okay, so this is again what the prompt flow is all about, which I already quickly covered that briefly previously, and also just highlight those earlier. Quickly, key concepts, right? The connections, you need a connection in order to connect to your remote APIs, or for example, if you are connecting to your OpenAI, you need a connection, right? This is a key value pair. You can also maintain your secrets here as well, especially associated with your keys or any of that. So that's where the connection comes into the play. Runtime is where it's pretty much a Docker image, which is where your prompt flow code base really run or you deploy to. And flow is your overall orchestrator, where you have various different steps in a flow, which executes either parallelly or sequentially. And the tools there are specific tools which are readily available for you to consume and plug it in. For example, you have vector database as a tool, which you can just drop in, or a Python code, right? So you can just drop that as a Python block and write your own code in there. So there are various different pre-built tools are available. If none of them meets your need, then you can always go and drop your Python code in there. And variants are various different variants you can also manage as part of your prompt. So with that, I don't want to take too much time. I will just eventually dive into some of these evaluation methods at very high level, but we're gonna just take a look into from a demo perspective, and we'll see how you plug this in, right, in your evaluation methods. All right, so with that, don't wanna spend too much time on this, and then let's jump to the demo here. And so here is the just a quick overview of what the interface looks like. So, sorry, anybody has any question? Okay. So here's the interface looks like. So this overall interface is part of prompt flow is currently part of the Azure ML interface. So this is where you log in into your Azure ML Studio, and then you're going to see the prompt flow on the left side, and you click on it, and this is where the prompt flow canvas comes in, and then you can create the flows here. So as I mentioned, there are connections here. There's a runtime here. Obviously, first thing you have to do is you have to create the runtime in order to run the flow, and then you can just create a new runtime and then associated this the runtime to your existing compute, and obviously you can go and create your compute here based on your need. You can just set that one up. You can set the different libraries and all those things that may be needed. You can set all those things up in your compute. So once you associate your first step was to get runtime, as I mentioned. And then once you're ready for that one, define any connections for example, to OpenAI or whatever you may have. You can just go and create your flow here. So I already created a couple of flows here. The best way to really use the flow is you should go and always try to reuse wherever their existing flows in the galleries are out there. And you can, whichever flow that meets your need, you can start with that, and that gives you a good starting point rather than trying to create your own, right? If nothing really meets your need, you can always go back to your base flows here. The standard flow is pretty much the same as chart flow, except for chart flow has the history associated with that. And then the last one you have is the evaluation flow, which just you create the evaluation against any of the standard flow or your chart flow. So what I had done, which I showcased to you last time, was a web classification, was I cloned from there. And what it really does right now, let me bring that one up. And this is a canvas here. So the right side, you see the visual side of it. It's non-editable. Any edits that you need to do, or you need to tie this particular step to this step, you need to do it on the left side of this window here. So what this, quickly before we jump into evaluation, what this particular flow is doing is just going out to a specific URL. In this case, here's a URL. It is going out, fetching the contents of that particular URL, and then it's passing that into a next block, which is your Python block, right? And you can always add new blocks by clicking here, or you can just use an existing tools which are available so far, embeddings and all those things. But again, none of these things you need. You can just always drop a Python code, and then you can write your own code there, right? So in this case, the second block is your Python here. And this is basically taking the input, which you can define it here, right? That this particular flow is taking this input, and this input comes from your previous input, which is right here, right? This input is coming from here. So you are just trying that this input is feeding into this one, right, at the end. And basically what you're doing is this is using the beautiful soup to really go and extract the information from that page, and then basically it classify that particular content. So it summarizes it first, and then it calls the LLM model to really do the classification, and then it just displays the output. So that's really what it's trying to do here. And all these components are mapped, as I said earlier, was that once you extract the information out from the URL, the content of that particular page, you are passing that information now into this new block, which is your OpenAI, Azure OpenAI connection. You are passing using this particular deployment name, which is your text DaVinci, is what you are using here. With all this advanced setting, you can configure here, right, as part of this OpenAI. And then basically you are passing this information as a prompt, which basically is inputted from this particular block on the top here, right? This block is feeding into this one, and that's where you have basically map this information here to a text, and then you have just dynamically putting that text in here. And then you're calling the OpenAI, passing this information. It summarizes the text, you're asking it to summarize, and this output eventually will feed it into your second request to LLM, and then basically it just classifies that information. So in order to do a evaluation, what you do is you go and do a bulk test, right? So you can do an individual test, which is what we are doing it here. You can just run this specific one here. It will run the whole flow, but it's only going to do it's only going to pass one URL to it, right? But if you want to do a bulk test where you want to evaluate multiple URLs, and then you want to see how it classifies or not, and then based on that, you can tweak your prompts. Just one thing quickly to highlight there is you can create a multiple variant of this particular prompt. And the way you can create the variants is by clicking this here. And then what it does is it creates a new variant. You can change your text here or whatever that your prompt as part of the prompt engineering, which would be something different than, right, that previous prompt that you may have. And then you can create a, for example, new version here. And now you have two variation of your prompts here. So you can see here, there are two variants here. And then when you call this, it's going to call evaluation. We're going to do and call two different variants, and it's going to evaluate the variation of those two prompts, and it's going to give you the output. And then you can compare the results and see whichever particular prompt worked better, right? And then based on that, you can always productionizing that once you're satisfied with a very specific prompt, right? So in this case, I'm going to continue to use just a one single prompt, so you can always go back to one prompt here. So I hit that the second prompt in this case. So the way evaluation work is you go here and put the bulk test here. That's fine, right? And this is where you can define. First, you have to obviously select which particular variants that you are interested in. There are two variants here, or you can just use a very specific variant in this case, right? The next one you have to do is you have to define the source of your information, which you can obviously upload your data set that you may have it, maybe sitting in some local place and stuff like that. And you can just pass in the information. I already have uploaded this data set, which basically is a URL and category, right? So here is the URL, and here is the expected output that you are expecting when this prompt is run against this LLM model, right? So, and this is what you are going to evaluating against. So this is a set of text data that you are passing. So once you upload this one, it stores this data in your data, and you can access it in your Azure ML as well. And I'll show you where it is residing. Then next steps is you go and then you select your evaluation method, and these are different evaluation methods are there. Some are you have to map it to your existing data that you may have. For example, you have manually created a data where you have said, well, this URL, the right category is this one, right? And then once you run your code, you say, well, the code produced or your LLM model gave you this category, and this is where you comparing that. So that is one way you can do that is you can provide your outcome ahead of time, or you can rely on in some cases where you rely on GPT model as a judge of that. So you can run that particular output, whatever you are producing, and then you can say, well, okay, let's GPT-4, for example, be a judge of the groundedness, and then it compares that whatever you have produced against that GPT produce output or for output, and then you can compare that result. So there are some evaluation which requires a GPT model or LLM model, and some requires you can manually provide that information. So since this is a classification, we can use, for example, the classification accuracy one, right? In this case, that's what I use there. And then what it provides you the information is which particular becomes your ground truth here, right? So in this case, you already have provided the ground truth alongside with that URL. So you can always pick that particular one, which is what you have provided here as a category. And in this case, the prediction one is what your prompt flow is producing, right? In this case, your prompt flow output is become. And then what it does compare those two categories and provide you the output of those and give you the accuracy and all those kind of stuff alongside with that. So once you click next here, it goes and you just submit this job. And then basically it processes information and then it runs all the flows with the different variants and it compares the result and produces the output. So I already done this one. And basically, the way you can go and take a look at your results are right here, right? So if you go on the top here, these are your bulk runs here. You can see it here. And this shows you all the runs that you may have already run, right? So you can run multiple variants, multiple changes you may do, and then you can run multiple tests here. And then what this produces here is, if you click on one of this one, or let's say, and then basically it gives you this particular view here. And then if you go and look into the output, it does compare the output. In this case, for example, my flow did not run very well because I missed something, right? I didn't configure something right. So in my case, it didn't really process things well. But if I go back here and I make some tweaks in my prompts and everything, and if you look at this one, hopefully this one, which I ran after, it did produce some results here. And then if you look at the the metrics here, it's going to show it's a 0.85 accuracy, right? So if you go here, you can choose which particular run that you are mapping this back, right? So if I map this particular run to the run that previous run I did, you can see that the output that what the prompt flow produce versus what the ground truth that you have set. And then it tells you that whether this output matched or not, right? In this case, this one is incorrect because it didn't match. In this case, it is correct. So overall, it gives you the score of how many it matched and how many it didn't match and all those things. And then at the end, you get the metrics here, which basically tells you the overall accuracy of how many of them accurately matched or not, right? In this case, you can export the result out. The other thing, good feature is it's not only that you evaluate against one particular run, you can always go back and compare the results of multiple runs, right? And then you can compare the metrics in this case, and it will tell you that with this particular variant, this is what my accuracy is. Again, as I said, I only ran with one variant, but you can run this against multiple variants, and it's going to show you out of this particular bulk run that I did. If you have 5 variants, it's going to show you 5 variants, and then it's going to show you the accuracy of each 5 variants. So this is a very good way of really measuring your prompts engineering that you have been doing on your prompts, and then comparing those results against which prompts were doing good job, or how particular flow or a specific flow that you have been using producing what accuracy in that case. So that's really all about prompt flow. The other thing is, as I mentioned, is once you are satisfied this thing, you can go and deploy this, right? So once you are satisfied that this particular variant is good to go, you just click on the deploy, and what it does is it creates an endpoint in Azure ML, and endpoint is just going to be sent create a URL for you where you can access that endpoint, right? Within the endpoint, you can create a multiple deployments. And what that means is you can create multiple models deployed, right, in your Azure ML, and you can tie multiple models to your single endpoint, and then you can do A/B testing on it, right? You can say, well, 90% of traffic should go into one particular model, and then the 10% traffic should go, right? So you can do some testing, user testing on those kind of stuffs, and then you can evaluate that what user feedback is getting provided, right, for 2 different sets of models. So this is pretty straightforward. You just go here, set up your endpoint name here, provide your authentication type, whether you need a key-based or token-based. You put a system assigned identity. You click next here. You also provide what is the output that you are expecting in this case, and then any connection information that your prompt flow requires, right? So in this case, I'm connecting to OpenAI in this case, so I need to select that this is a connection when you deploy this particular model. This is the connection string that you should be using. Once you use that, you define your compute. Here you can choose different compute types here depending on your need and on your workload, and you just set how many instances that you need. Once it's all there, just click next. It literally takes about 10 minutes or so, and there you go. I mean, you don't have to do anything. It is a managed endpoint. No installation, nothing you have to do. It just deploys there and it exposes the endpoint. Pretty straightforward there. Once this is created, you will going to see that you're going to see a model in this model registry here, right? This is what it gets deployed. And if you have multiple variation, you can have multiple models here. And then you will also see an endpoint here, right? Which once you run that step that I showed you, this is where you're going to see your endpoint. And as you can see here, right now I only have one model associated to an endpoint. 100% of the traffic is going there. But if you have multiple model, you can always go and add an additional deployment. In this case, for example, you select that, and let's say if I have another model, for example, you select that model, and then you can define a compute and all those kind of stuff there. And then at the end, it will going to show you two different deployments. And then you can configure that how much of a traffic should go into this particular model and how much of a traffic should go into the other model, right? You can also do some auto configuration, auto scaling, and all those kind of stuff. You can always do those kind of stuff. So not to dive too much into this one, but yes, you can do lots of stuff with this deployment aspects of it. And once it's deployed, you can go and do the testing on it, right? So in this case, for example, this was the URL I had there, and you can perform a test here, and then it's going to give you the categories that you are expecting in that case, or whatever the, right? So this is what the category that it provided. The other thing you can also have here is you can consume. Once you are satisfied with that, you can share this URL. You can send this authentication key to your whoever is your end subscriber of this particular endpoint, for whether it's a mobile app or any web app that you may be consuming this for. And then you just, it gives you multiple options here, or a starter code for you, Python, C#, and R. And you can just test this thing out, right? Pretty straightforward there. The other thing I would quickly like to show here is going to the model here. Yeah, so one good thing about here is all the pipeline that you have created, right? It also shows you the code here, right? That whatever the code that has been written behind the scene. So you can always go and take this and put it as part of the Git repository, and then you can do your CI/CD and all those kind of stuff alongside with it. So it has a full transparency of what has been produced and what has been developed, right? So one other thing which I would like to mention, which I forgot to mention about that. So if you go into your prompt flow, and let's say if I go into here, let's go back into your one of your evaluation that you did. It also actually tells you the evaluation code that it has run behind the scene. So you have a full control over what particular code that the classification comparison that we did. It basically shows you the code here, right? What exactly it did. So if you are not really satisfied with, let's say, that evaluation method it is providing by default, you can always go and manage this particular code, and you can come up with your own logic to compare things, or if you have your own internal stuff where you are using that to evaluate your custom build or whatever you may have, you can always create your own evaluation method if you need, right? So this, I just wanted to highlight that. So this is where your evaluation model comes into the play. So you don't always have to produce the evaluation method from a prompt flow. You can always come here and then create a evaluation flow here, and then you can always produce your own evaluation method however you want, right? I mean, you can pass various different inputs here depending on your need. You can pass your own code here or write your own code to do the evaluation. Pretty flexible. There are lots of out-of-the-box evaluation available, but it also gives you the flexibility of bringing your own evaluator and write your own code, and then there you go. So any questions? Yeah, I'll
yes,
leave.
there is a question in the chat window. It's about plugin, like how plugins will work in prompt flow.
Absolutely, yeah. So are you talking about the plugins from LangChain side of it, or are you talking about the
Actually,
plugins from a tools perspective?
I think the gentleman who asked the question, he may have to drop off.
Okay.
But if you can address
Sure,
both,
I can
then
address just a brief. So if you're talking about the LangChain plugins, there is a full support of LangChain. You can bring your own libraries and plugins alongside with that. Yes, you can always, yes, you can either reuse LangChain plugins or you can write your own custom tools and plugins, whatever LangChain offers, and then you can use that in your code block in the Python. Aside from that, the tools and all those things, there are, as I said, there are pre-built tools that are available. But let's say if you are calling a specific vector database, right, which is not provided there, you can always drop a Python block and you can write your own tools or plugins, whatever you have already available there. You can always call it, right? So it does support LangChain, semantic kernels, any other libraries that you have that you are using for plugins. Yeah, you can always use those, or you can write your own as well. But it is supported, yes, at the end.
thank you. We have 2 more minutes, just a time check, man.
Yeah. Any other questions that people may have?
Don't see any other questions in the chat window. Please, folks, if you have any question, open up your mic and feel free to ask. Okay. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any other, any other questions, folks? Tonight, should we close the session? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just don't unshare. Let me just stop the recording and then we can.
Yeah.